Welcome to today's Preparing to Trade with the UK Post Brexit, How to Prepare for Customs webinar. My name is Elizabeth Bowen and I'm the Senior Executive here in the SFA. I hope you can hear me. Today we are joined by Carol Lynch, a partner in BDO, who focuses on customs and international trade services. Nora Mackey is today's webinar technician. While we are waiting on others to join, I will just let you know that this webinar will last around 20 minutes. We've muted all of your phones to ensure no noise interference. We will circulate the slide deck and recording after the webinar. At the end, you will receive a short survey to complete, as we love to hear your feedback so we can make changes. If you've any questions for Carol during the presentation, pop them in the chat bar and I will read them out at the end of her presentation. Carol has more than 25 years experience in customs and international trade. Carol is currently heavily involved in advising clients on the impact of Brexit, so she must be very busy, and is working with several high-profile companies in this regard. I will now hand you over to Carol.
Thanks. So good morning, everybody. What I'm going to discuss this morning is how to prepare to trade with the UK post-Brexit and how to prepare for customs. So this is specifically focused on the customs issues that you need to take account of in preparing for 1 January. So just by way of introduction, again, my name is Carol Lynch. I'm the partner in charge of customs and trade in BDO. And our unit here advises companies on importing and exporting on an international basis and has done so for over 20 years. Now what we're doing obviously is preparing people as well for importing and exporting into the UK, which will now be a non-EU country. In addition, we have a second branch which has been launched about 2 weeks ago to provide companies, particularly those who are having difficulty in this area, to provide them with customs clearance services for Brexit. So if you are having difficulties accessing a clearance agent, so a lot of our clients have been, this is specifically set up to deal with those requirements for import and export post-Brexit. So if we look at the where we stand at the moment, as we know, the Brexit transition ends 31st of December. I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing us all say, oh, it's Brexit happening 1 January. But we do keep saying it because I suppose in fairness, there's been so many stops and starts, people still do get confused and say, well, is it really happening? Will there be an extension? Well, how does the impact of the current trade talks? So the very first point to take into account is that Brexit is happening on 1 January. There are no transition arrangements. There are no discussions with regard to extensions. This is coming into effect. So this time it's real. So it's important to be prepared for that event. So as of 1st of January, trading with Great Britain is going to be the same as trading with any non-EU country. So if anybody has familiarity with importing from any non-EU country, the States or Canada, trading with Great Britain going forward is going to be exactly the same. The one thing that I certainly do find that people get a little confused with is what is the impact of the current discussions regarding the free trade agreements. So if we look at the free trade agreement negotiations that are going on, in a customs context, the impact of those will be on your customs duties. So will you pay customs duties or will you not? Will there be a reduction on the tariff element, the duty element? But it's only that aspect. So it's a very small aspect of the overall requirements for importing and exporting, notwithstanding that it's very important. So typically the type of questions we get asked, and I thought I'd just round up a couple for today. So you know, people would learn, I suppose, or you get the experience of what everybody else is asking. And the first question is always, will duty be payable on trade between Ireland and the UK? And that, as I said just there now, is going to result out of the free trade agreement discussions. So if we have a free trade agreement by 31st of December, then it is likely that that trade agreement will allow for 0% customs duties on most goods that are traded. But I do have to caveat that with the fact that you will have to be able to show to the customs authorities that your goods qualify as what's called originating in the UK or the EU, and you will have to provide documentation to support that assertion. And that gets us into our documentation requirement. Without a free trade agreement, so with a free trade agreement, we've got a origin document plus 0% tariffs. Without a free trade agreement, then the tariffs are payable. But along with that, you're going to have to lodge your import declaration, your export declaration, and that's on leaving Ireland an export declaration, on entering the UK an import declaration, and vice versa, together with providing your invoices, CMR, packing documents, shipping details. So all those are going to be required, and that is regardless of the current negotiations. Are customs declarations required if there is a trade agreement? So again, I know I keep emphasizing this, but I know it causes a lot of confusion to people. The answer is yes. So as of this point, there is no delay on this. There's no either or. There's no maybe it might, maybe it won't. From 1st of January, you will have to lodge customs declarations when you leave Ireland for the UK and when you import goods from the UK into Ireland and vice versa. In terms of compliance costs, these can get quite heavy. So these are always an issue for clients. How much is that documentation going to cost me? And first thing to say is there's no cost to revenue. You're not paying revenue for lodging any declarations. It's the in-house or outsourced costs that are going to affect you. So if you take you have two options really in looking at how do you lodge your declarations. You're either going to train up your staff in-house and lodge your declarations in-house and license a software program to work in-house again that will have a direct access to revenue, and that will cost you primarily the staffing costs. Or you're going to lodge, you're going to pay an agent to lodge those declarations on your behalf. Those rates are obviously going to vary depending on the agent themselves. The estimation I've used really for the last 2 years is that if you are lodging an export declaration and an import declaration, so if you're responsible for both the export from Ireland and the import into the UK, a reasonable assumption is that's going to cost you €100 per shipment. If you, what happens with agri-food? So this is a very specific area. I'm not going to go into in detail here, but if you're involved in moving food products, then very important to register with the Department of Agriculture and log on to their Brexit website to understand the requirements there in relation to registration, use of pre-notification, obtaining health certs, and use of the traces system. What is the risk of delays? I'm afraid that this is going to happen. I can't see a scenario in where things will move the way they do right now. The just-in-time model is going to be very difficult to maintain. So it is inevitable there will be some delays. The extent of those delays will in some cases be out of your control because it will be the requirements now that goods have to be checked in certain cases. There will be risk analysis at the borders, and there could be delays because people in front of you aren't prepared. What you can control, however, is your own preparation. And certainly the information that's supplied to the revenue commissioners has to be correct. If it's incorrect, they will not accept it. So that will cause you delays. So it's really important. What is within everybody's control is to ensure that they are providing the right information to the revenue and HMRC, and they have the right documentation to prevent those delays. Another question is often who is responsible for the import and export requirements, and that's the discussion you really want to have with your customers and suppliers. So if you currently deliver on a delivered basis to the UK, we are finding that UK companies are putting pressure on Irish companies to continue to supply on a delivered basis, which would mean that you're responsible for both export from Ireland and import into the UK. Similarly, if you're buying from a UK customer, you might want to put pressure on them to continue to provide on a delivered basis, or split the requirements so that the UK company lodges the export declaration and you lodge the import declaration. Are there any changes to VAT? Yes, and I'm not a VAT expert, so I'm not going to go into these in any particular detail. But currently, as you'll know, if you are accounting for VAT, you're doing it on your intra-EU VAT returns. Going forward, you will have to pay your import VAT on arrival, so import VAT becomes due on arrival. There are potentially going to be a relief, so in both countries, so that import VAT will not be payable on arrival, but will be accounted for in your VAT return. what if you import and export, re-export? In that situation, I would advise anybody who's importing goods for re-export to ensure that they get involved in some customs planning. So you don't want a situation where you're importing goods into Ireland, paying the duty, exporting them out of Ireland, importing them into the UK, paying the duty again. You want to put a planning process in place, which will mean that you're only paying duties once. And then finally, so where do I get a clearance agent? This is an ongoing issue. We are short about 3,000 clearance agents in the country, and they definitely are difficult to obtain. So for anybody who is having difficulty obtaining a clearance agent, as I said, we do have a facility available for clients and client companies of our associated networks, such as the SFA, through Declaran, and you can log on there and register your interest and at least have a backup option or have an option while hopefully you would continue to, hopefully you would use them, but also if you are trying to work out where are you going to get an agent. So just by way of a very quick recap, what happens at the moment? So at the moment, all products move within the EU freely. So we know people don't have any real experience of customs. We haven't had customs controls and borders since I think back in 1992. So that expertise isn't there, and people are not used to importing and exporting rules when buying and selling within the EU. And that's the big advantage of the EU. That's one of its major advantages, one of the major success stories is the single market. So once goods are customs cleared, they move freely throughout the EU, and they won't be stopped by customs. They have what's called free circulation status. Moving forward, however, this is going to change. So if we look at the current, what's going to happen post 1 January, we now have our boat leaving Ireland. So your goods have arrived at the port and they are looking to be shipped to the UK. What happens? You're going to have to lodge a customs declaration on export. Then you're going to arrive in the UK. You're going to have to lodge another import declaration to clear goods through customs. If you're moving on, if you're using the UK land bridge, then you would, I want to change this slightly to say this is now a transit system. So you would be lodging a transit declaration as opposed to an export declaration leaving Ireland. You have your transit declaration in the UK through GMBS. You have another one you have to then depart the UK, notify that in GMBS, and arrive in France and notify that through Brexit IT, which is the French system. You'd also need to, you can't clear your goods for transit in Calais, so you need to find an alternative customs office to clear your goods for the transit. So as you can see, quite a lot of steps now to be taken. Where goods moved freely from Ireland to the UK or through the land bridge to continental Europe, we're now looking at either 2 stops for exporting to the UK, or we're looking at 3 systems for moving goods through the UK under the transit system. And the same exact procedure is going to happen in reverse. So how do you prepare within that context? First steps, I'm just going to keep an eye on the time because I could probably talk for all morning. Ensure you have a UK EORI and an EU EORI. You will not move your goods into or out of the EU or into or out of the UK without an EORI number. This is the most straightforward, simplest step to take, but it's amazing the number of companies who still have not got their EORI. If you don't have an EORI in Europe, and or in, let's say, Ireland, if you are selling into the UK and you don't have a UK EORI, please do that instantly. It will take you no more than 5 minutes and you'll have it within a couple of days. And that's your customs registration. So this is not a complex thing. It's not like a VAT registration. This is simply going online into the revenue system, into the UK customs system, and requesting activation of your registration. The next thing, as I said, is how are you going to move your goods? And this is quite tricky because you're going to have to decide between, as I said, taking this in-house or obtaining an external agent. There's a couple of different ways of approaching it. If you're looking at taking it in-house, well, the first thing I'd always say to everyone is do a cost-benefit analysis, because if you're doing it in-house, you are going to have to either employ staff or reallocate staff. That's going to take a time out of the business. So there's a staff cost. You're also going to have to look at how does your shipments move. Are you shipping 9 to 5? Or are you shipping 24 hours a day or 20 days? Do you get the 2 a.m. boat? Do you get arrive in Dublin at 5 a.m.? If you're outside of normal working hours, will your staff stay on, or can you put shift work in place? So you really need to tie in your import and export declaration requirements with your shipping requirements and see when are you going to have those documents available and how can you lodge those declarations. Alternatively, if you're getting an agent, you also need to understand how you're going to compile the information for the agent, because an agent only acts on your behalf. They are essentially an agent. So you will still have to give them all the details, all the data, classifications, origins, values, invoices, CMOs, etc., in order for them to complete that declaration on your behalf. In relation to this, I would say it's very important actually to take advantage of the training courses that are out there. So Enterprise Ireland run a Clear Skills initiative. So if you are looking to take your customs in-house, they will sign up for the Clear Customs initiative, and then they will take you through the steps of how to do that. And there are various other training programs available through your LEOs, your Enterprise Ireland's, or BIAs, ourselves, all on how to actually complete documentation, how to lodge customs declarations, and look at the bigger and broader Brexit picture. So that goes back to have you got the information needed for your agent to complete. There's 54 boxes on the import side and export side, so quite a lot of information there that does need to be supplied. This is our document. Now, it doesn't actually look like this anymore. It's online as opposed to hard copy. This is what it used to look like back in the 80s. And not that, of course, I remember that from the 80s. But this is what it would have typically looked like with a hard copy and 8 different carbon copies underneath. We don't have that anymore. This is all online, and there are no green boxes, but just keep the colours in there to make it look a little bit more visually accessible. So on this, you need to provide details of your consignor and your consignee. You need to provide your Incoterms, which is your terms of trade. You need to provide your commodity code, which is a tariff classification code. You need to provide your country of origin code, your customs procedure code. Are you delivering and clearing the goods at the port, or are you moving them into a duty suspension procedure? So all this information, and I really again want to emphasize, this is a tax declaration. This information must be correct. It cannot be incorrect, or you will have fines and penalties. Customs audits take place in 2 places. First of all, at the border, and actually, we have a very open economy, so there isn't a significant amount of risk-based analysis at the border, but they do take place at the border. That's on a risk basis or to inaccurate information. But you will also have a customs audit within the next 3 years. Every trader must have a customs audit, in the same way you have a VAT audit or corporate tax audit. You will have a customs audit, and they will go through all this documentation. They will look for usually about 20 entries, and if they find a repeated pattern of error, they'll open up the audit for 3 years. So really important, and I'm not trying to scare people, it's just that it is important to know that this is a tax declaration, and you must understand the information that you're providing, and it must be correct. Overall, what's the impact in Ireland? Declarations are expected to increase from 1.6 to 20 million. So we can see a huge number of increases in declarations. The revenue systems have gone through massive overhaul to enable them to cope with this increase. Revenue and customs will be operating on a 24/7 basis from 1 January due to obviously goods moving 24/7. We'll have transit. 80% of our goods leaving Ireland for continental Europe go through the land bridge. That is going to be extremely complicated from the information that's coming out from Ireland, the UK and France. We're going to have 92,000 new traders now looking to lodge customs declarations and comply with customs rules. And we're short 3,000 customs clearance agents. So overall, unfortunately, not a pretty picture. I've given a link here. These slides will be, I believe, circulated after the presentation. So there is a link here to the Customs Clearance Service Declarant. and you can go online there and look through the services that they will provide in terms of lodging declarations, maintaining your customs declarations, and interfacing with customs on your behalf. So that's on the operation side. The next thing we want to look at is, will you have a duty liability? So the first part I've just talked about, those first 4 steps, they are required now. It doesn't matter what happens over the next couple of months, they are required 1 January. So now we look at the duty liability. So that this may or may not happen, and this is going to be based on the results of the trade negotiations. And fortunately, I saw this morning that does look to be a little bit of positive news last coming out there. So you want to check if you have a customs liability. You want to look online in two links, which I've provided here. First of all, the first one is the EU link. So you can type in your tariff code on tariff, and that will give you the import duty rate arriving in Europe. If you want to look at the import duty rate for exports into the UK, you go onto the UK tariffs, again type in your tariff code, and it'll give you the import duty rate into the UK. So you can check there to see what your liability is. And once you've determined what the liability is, you now want to see, how are you going to pay for this? How are you going to account for it? So again, I just copied this from the Declaration website because it's convenient for giving you automatic access to the declaration applications. So you can have 2 options. You can either pay by cash, in which case you will lodge your cash into your revenue TAN account. So once you get your EORI, you'll have a TAN account, which is equivalent of like a revenue current account assigned. So you can lodge your cash in there, and then when your goods arrive in Ireland, the duty will be automatically deducted from that TAN account. Or you can look for a deferred payment account. Deferred payment account is obviously much better from a cash flow perspective, insofar as you will have a deferred payment authorization and you don't have to pay customs duty until the following month. So let's say for everything you import in January, you'd be paying your customs duties on the 15th of February. So it gives you that cash flow benefit. That does have to be supported by a guarantee, which can either be a bank guarantee or a cash lodgement. And again, the links are there as to how to apply for that deferred payment authorization and how to obtain your guarantee. Then getting back into the operational area, we want to make sure, do you know the procedures at the ports? There's a lot going to change. For anybody who's on the revenue website or the revenue presentations on Monday and Tuesday, you'll have seen the extent of the change that's coming into effect at the ports. So you do need to be familiar with those procedures. You need to talk with your hauliers and freight forwarders and ensure that they and you are connected on the information that's being supplied. You're going to need the pre-boarding notification to be set up, and your haulier and your freight forwarder will need to do that for you. You'll have a similar system in the UK. So procedurally and operationally, and literally on a step-by-step movement basis, do document this. Next, have to talk to your customers and suppliers. As I said, you need to ensure you know who's acting as the importer, who's acting as the exporter. Certainly over the last 2 weeks, we've had an inundation of calls from our offices in the UK, with UK companies looking to establish in Ireland, where they need to now be able to be established here in order to supply Irish customers. And similarly, Irish companies have been working at looking at supplying in the UK due to pressure from UK customers. As I said, if you're importing agricultural goods, it's a whole different area. It's an additional level of compliance on top of the customs requirements. So do log on to the Brexit DAFM website, or again, contact me for any further information, and contact Board BIA. Very, very specific requirements in this area. You need to check single market regulations. There's a lot, the government again is doing a lot of webinars to update people. So between the Food Safety Authority, the National Standards Authorities, there's a huge number. So if you go onto the government Brexit website, you'll see all the updates in relation to single market regulations. Essentially, I would say they probably boil down into the fact that if you are importing from the UK going forward, you are now the first point of import into the EU. So somebody in your chain, either the importer or the company, a UK company who's established in Ireland or the EU, somebody needs to be a representative person for EU purposes. So there needs to be somebody in the EU who customs can contact, or this can be contact for CE marking or labelling, It's either going to be the importer or an EU established entity of that UK company. You want to make sure your staff are trained, and this is a complex area, a lot to take on board in a couple of months. So as I said, take advantage of all the training that's out there. The LEOs run one-day training courses; they're all free for the companies in their area. Make sure you signed up to them. Enterprise Ireland run Brexit Bites. Sign into them. There's Brexit planning vouchers available from EI. Intertrade also provide Brexit planning vouchers. So there's a lot of support available out there. Take advantage of all of it. As I said, I'm not going to go into this in detail. I'm not a VAT expert, but just make sure that if you are delivering goods into the UK on a deliver basis, that you're VAT registered in the UK. And I'm assuming that everybody here will be VAT registered in Ireland. Then we need to look at duty planning. If you import for re-export, you don't want to be paying duty twice. So what planning procedures can you put in place? I've mentioned AEO and trusted trader status, and I probably should stop talking fairly shortly, but I've mentioned that because everybody asks about AEO, everybody asks about trusted trader. It's something you're certainly going to want in the future. It's not going to be a priority if you haven't got it now, because it'll take a year to get through that process. If you're dealing with alcohol or oil or tobacco, you need to be sure that you understand the new excise movement rules. And as I said, if you're involved in transit, there's a lot of complications there that you need to be familiar with, and your hauliers need to be familiar with. And somebody as well needs to have a guarantee in place to cover the movement of goods under transit. So I think that's a very quick run through the requirements for Brexit, and it should be part of an overall package. I would recommend don't look at customs in isolation. You really should look at customs, VAT, tax, and Brexit all together as one plan. So do get VAT advice, Brexit strategy advice, look at your tax planning. We're certainly saying in BDO that we have to look at all aspects together. But if you haven't kind of really started on this process yet, do make sure you start with the customs, because that's how your goods are going to move or not move. Plenty of information available on our BDO website. If you sign up for the newsletters, you'll get updates as we send them out, and send them out fairly regularly. And I try to keep the news section updated here, so all current news goes into the website there. So there we go. I think that's probably enough from me at the moment. If anyone wants to ask questions.
Thanks, Carol. I find that really informative, and I think it just echoed a lot of the messages that we have been providing to our members, but it gave a really clear and concise information about what they need to do. A member told me recently, Brexit's out of our hands, and it's not out of our hands at all. As business owners, as business managers, as staff, we need to prepare for Brexit. Like Carol said, it's happening. Easy steps to take that Carol has kindly provided here, and we provide on our website www.sfa.ie, and you'll also find information in our previous e-zines. And like Carol said, if you're in agriculture, look at the Department of Agriculture. And I'd also remind you, if you're, like she said as well, if you're in food, look at Food Safety Authority. If you're construction, look at the local government, that a lot of your corresponding government departments and agencies will have a button on their website about how to prepare for Brexit, and what might be something that you haven't thought about, the small niggly little thing that actually you have not thought about and needs to be done so that we can prepare for it. So I really appreciate that. Now I'm just looking here to see if we have any questions, and we do. As you said, Carol, obviously VAT is becoming something that people are coming in. You're not a VAT expert, so anyone who has provided us with a VAT question, I'll get back to them. And what actually we'll do as well is that in the next 2 weeks we'll put an article up on VAT through the SFA e-zine, and we'll promote it, because I think that definitely is something that is coming through to us. One of the questions here is just, we have suppliers in the UK. Again, the best way around transport and customs, should we have a base in the UK and set up a subsidiary and hold stock there? Now, Carol, do you have any thoughts on that?
If you have a supplier in the UK, I would be encouraging you to try and get the supplier to actually take responsibility for the export declarations and the export movements. If you set up a base in the UK to do that, it's going to take a huge amount of responsibility onto you. And most, in my experience, most suppliers will accept responsibility for lodging export declarations. They're a little easier than the import declaration side of things, and they will have a lot more access to HMRC. So if you can't do that, if you're purchasing on an ex-works basis, then I couldn't comment on whether you would need to set up a base in the UK. That would be something you need to look at with an overall perspective, looking at both the tax and VAT and customs implications. So don't make a decision in one place that negatively impacts on another. You probably wouldn't need to have a base per se, but you certainly, if you're buying ex-works, you are going to need to take responsibility for the export declaration, and that will involve, quite a lot of input into the UK side of things. So I'm happy to speak to whoever that is separately and just look at their overall picture.
Great. Do small businesses need to register with HMRC?
If you're importing or exporting, you need to register. So if you are importing into the UK and you're clearing customs, so you're delivering to your customer in the UK, you will need to register for an EOI.
Great. And I would remind members that HMRC and the British government have created some great websites and have information actually for if you're from Ireland, if you're from another European country. So you will find all that information on their website. So I would recommend that you visit them, the UK websites, and just have a look around for that type of information. Now, do you have a contact for a customs agent? This one came in prior to your presentation, and I think you can tell us more about Declaron. Yes. I was very impressed with it. And I didn't know that we were missing 3,000. So if there's any small businesses out there that want to pivot, I definitely think that's an area for the future.
Yeah, this was an issue that we were facing BDO over the last year. A lot of our clients were struggling because unless you are importing and exporting globally, you have no agent. You know, if you've been working with an agent because you import from the States or whatever, okay, that's fine. You have one to contact. But if you've been trading the single market, of course you don't have an agent and there are none. So in order to kind of meet that need, we set up between BDO and Fexco, we set up Declaron, which is a customs clearance agency, but it also has an online platform where you can submit the basic information related to your shipment. Slightly different thing about Declaron to other agents is we work with you over the next 3 months to have your customs information uploaded so that you will have your Brexit planning work done. You upload that information into the portal, and then when it comes to moving your goods, you simply have to input details regarding the invoice and the shipping details. So it makes it a little bit easier and faster. But what I was saying there about being prepared, about the accuracy of the information being important, what we don't want to do is leave it to January to start, saying here's the product, here's the classification. That's going to be a problem. So in order to avoid delays or minimize delays, what we're saying to companies is let's work on this over the next couple of months, get that information up in the system. So we've already tackled the quality of the customs information, and now when it comes to January, you only need to provide your shipping information.
That's great, and we thank you for extending that to SFA members who I can say won't, like you say, have had any experience with the custom agents previously, and may almost be doing very small type of exporting out, or they might just be kind of not as regular, like you said. So it's great to get that support, and I know that's something that has been a worry to our members. Well, that's all of our questions. But before I go, I'd just like to remind you that in collaboration with our colleagues in IBEC, we will be holding another revenue webinar on the 16th of October. And like Carol said, I would definitely, if you didn't attend the 2-day revenue webinars this week, you can get the next one on the 16th of October. And we have a previous one up on the IBEC website as well that members can log into. The Data Protection Commissioners have agreed to come and speak to IBEC trade associations on the transfer of data to third countries, and we don't have a date for that yet, but like the revenue webinar, go to www.ibec.ie and keep an eye on that. to register for revenue, and then just keep an eye out for the Data Commissioners one. So as I said, after the webinar, you'll receive a short survey to complete, as we really appreciate your feedback so we can make changes. We'll also circulate the slide deck and the recording. So thank you, Carol, for joining us today and for your presentation. Thank you to Nora and all the IBEC webinar team who supported this recording. And finally, thank you to our members who I know are Brexit ready because they joined this webinar. And if you can do one thing maybe this weekend is ring a small business who you think might not be Brexit ready and tell them, share this link with them, tell them to go onto the SFA website, tell them to go and look at their LEO, because everyone's responsibility is to be Brexit ready. And I really don't want to have those calls on 1st January. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Take care.
Bye.